Hello and welcome to Written Words. And this lesson, which is called A Good Giggle, will hopefully leave you with a smile on your face. Because in this lesson, we're going to explore humour in writing. So we're going to look at the different types of humour found in literature. We're going to look at how English lends itself to wordplay. And we're going to explore what a pun is and why it's funny. Laughter, as the old saying goes, is the best medicine, and the ability to make people smile is indeed a great gift. Comedy comes in many forms, and in literature this includes techniques such as wordplay, satire, irony, farce, sarcasm, surprise, exaggeration, understatement, nonsense and incongruity. Humour is, of course, highly subjective, and different types of humour appeal to some people more than others. What makes one person laugh might not make another person laugh. People have very different preferences when it comes to humour. In literature, some books are hilarious all the way through and crack jokes on almost every line, while others use just the occasional humorous content to lighten the mood in the midst of something more serious. In the same way as someone delivering an important speech or a lecture might include a few jokes just to lighten the mood and keep the audience engaged. It would be impossible to list all the examples of humour in literature. But some classic examples include Shakespeare's comedies. Approximately 1/3 of Shakespeare's plays were comedies. The limericks of Edward Lear, which follow a specific rhyming pattern and which lots of people have taken up and made their own over the years. Lewis Carroll wrote a lot of nonsense poetry. Monologues by Mariette Edgar, including The Lion and Albert, and monologues by Joyce Grenfell as well. In Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are the perfect comedy duo. Roald Dahl's children's books are hilarious. British poet Pam Ayres writes hilarious poetry about ordinary life. Terry Pratchett wrote a huge number of books which a very large number of people find hilarious, and so on. Some humour is designed purely to entertain, such as Lewis Carroll's nonsense rhyme, Jabberwocky, which plays with language. He makes up words that sound plausible and comical, even though they're not real words. It's quite a long poem, but here's just one verse. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. A Jabberwock, the Jubjub bird, the Bandersnatch are not real creatures. Frumious is a lovely adjective, except it isn't an adjective. It's not a real word. It's made up just because it sounds good. Then there is humorous writing that is also used to convey a serious message. William Thackeray's Vanity Fair is a satire. It's a very funny book, but it's also a satire, and it's intended to ridicule the petty ways of English society. For example, in one place he says, her mamma ordered her dresses, her books, her bonnets, and her ideas for her. It's quite plausible that a mother would order dresses, books and bonnets for her daughter. But why her ideas? Surely she should come up with her ideas for herself. So Thackeray is using this comment to point his finger at society and ridicule the way we tell people what they should think. Adam Kay's memoir, This Is Going to Hurt, contains a lot of laugh out loud moments. It's a hilarious book to read, but the underlying message is something very serious. He is using his experiences as a doctor to point out the many inadequacies in the UK's National Health Service at the present time. One particular line that made me laugh out loud was this: "Natural does not equal safe. There's a plant in my garden where if you simply sat under it for 10 minutes, then you'd be dead." I asked him about that plant over a colonoscopy later. Water lily. Why is it funny? Because we're not expecting that answer. We're expecting to learn about some kind of herb that's poisonous, that all you have to do is sit underneath it and it poisons you and kills you. Whereas actually, it's a water lily, so if you sit under a water lily for 10 minutes, you're going to drown. There's also an element of humour in the fact that he's discussing this quite trivial thing over a colonoscopy. Not over a coffee or over the garden fence, but over a major operation. Now let's have a look at a humorous piece of poetry. We're going to look at A Frog's Fate by Christina Rosetti. And it goes like this. Contemptuous of his home beyond the village and the village pond, a large-souled frog who spurned each byway hopped along the imperial highway. Nor grunting pig nor barking dog could disconcert so great a frog. The morning dew was lingering yet, his sides to cool, his tongue to wet. The night dew, when the night should come, a travelled frog would send him home. Not so, alas, the wayside grass sees him no more, not so, alas. A broad-wheeled waggon unawares ran him down, his joys, his cares. From dying choke one feeble croak, the frog's perpetual silence broke. Ye buoyant frogs, ye great and small, even I am mortal after all. My road to fame turns out a wry way, I perish on the hideous highway. Oh, for my old familiar byway. The choking frog sobbed and was gone. The waggoner strode whistling on. Unconscious of the carnage done, whistling that waggoner strode on. Whistling, it may have happened so, a froggy would a-wooing go. A hypothetic frog trolled he, obtuse to a reality. O rich and poor, O great and small, such oversights beset us all. The mangled frog abides in cog, the uninteresting actual frog. The hypothetic frog alone is the one frog we dwell upon. So what is it that makes this poem humorous? Why is it funny? On the surface, it's about a frog that dies, so it shouldn't be funny. So where does the humour come from? First of all, the poem is written in a very melodramatic style. If it were to be performed out loud, it would give the performer plenty of scope for acting, particularly in the part when the frog is dying and he gives his dying speech. Ye buoyant frogs, ye great and small, even I am mortal after all, and so on. I perish on this hideous highway, and he longs for his familiar byway. So it's very over the top, it's very melodramatic in tone. Much more melodramatic than a frog on a highway would normally warrant. And then there is also contrast. There is the contrast between the ordinary frog and the dramatic style. There is also a contrast between the real frog and the hypothetic frog, as it's called, the frog in the song that the waggoner is singing as he goes along. He's singing a well-known song, A Froggy Would A-Wooing Go, which is trivial. And so in his mind is a frog, but his mind is thinking about a different frog. It's thinking about a hypothetic frog, not the real one that he's just killed on the road. The last verse emphasises the contrast even more. It says, "O rich and poor, O great and small." But like some of the other works that we've just looked at, this poem has an underlying message, something that's a little bit more serious. At the beginning of the poem, the frog is very confident. He's not just confident, he's overconfident. He thinks nothing bad can come to him because he's a very important frog. He is feeling a sense of his own importance to such an extent that he has become foolhardy. And then a very ordinary accident befalls him, and he realises that he's not the all-powerful frog he thought he was. He's just as mortal as any other frog. He no longer yearns to be on the imperial highway. He longs for his old familiar byway, and he is brought back to reality at the end of the poem. The poem is telling us to be careful, not to be overconfident, not to be foolhardy, but to look out for the dangers along the way and be realistic about our expectations. The poem also has a very definite rhyme and rhythm to it, which is a common feature in humorous poetry. The sense of the rhyme and the rhythm carries the poem along and helps to carry the humour along with it. One of the important keys to comedy is timing, and with the rhythm and the rhyme in the language, that makes sure that the timing is right for the comedy. And as a result, a lot of humorous writing makes for very good performances. Humorous poetry is very often best appreciated when read aloud, when performed well. And now for our language focus. Let's take a look at puns. What is a pun? I mentioned before that the English language lends itself very well to wordplay. That's because it has a large number of words called homonyms. Homonyms are words that are either spelt the same but pronounced differently, or words that sound the same but are spelt differently. And then there is even quite a large number of words which fall into both categories. They are spelt and sound the same, yet they have different meanings. This can, of course, occasionally lead to confusion, but if you are writing humour, it is a gift. It enables you to deliberately confuse people for comic effect. Jokes which are based on homonyms like this are called puns. So here are a couple of examples. Did you hear about the frog whose car broke down? He got towed away. So that's playing on the fact that toad, the animal, and toad, as in to pull, sound the same even though they're spelt differently. And what happened when the grape got crushed? It let out a little wine. When you crush grapes, you can make a drink called wine. But wine, spelt with an H, is also a sound that people make when they're hurt. So the grape letting out a little wine, is that the drink or is it the sound? And that's where the humour comes from. For our writing prompt for this lesson, think of as many homonyms as you can, or if you're struggling, look them up. And can you use any of them to make a joke? If you enjoy this and you can come up with lots of jokes, you could even write your own comedy routine to entertain your family and friends. As usual, there is a worksheet to accompany this lesson, which contains a transcript, the poem we read, some questions, some notes, and some ideas for further reading as well. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and in the meantime, happy writing.